Hey, before I begin, I just want to thank you all for the support on my last video. It has nearly 2,000 views, which isn't massive, but for me is a lot. I didn't expect anyone to watch a review of a canceled TV series that no one has even heard of, but I guess there's an audience for this kind of stuff, so I'll continue the series. And before we jump into this, if you enjoy my content and want to see more, please like and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. And also, let me know in the comments what other series you want to see me do. Okay, with that out of the way, roll the thing. So picking up from episode 1, Anything for Blood, we get the second episode entitled Intercessors, which according to Google means a person who intervenes on behalf of another, especially by prayer. I hope to see the meaning behind this, but no long intro this time, we're just gonna get straight into it. We begin almost exactly where we left off in episode 1, with Claire and her dad looking after Peter, and almost immediately I can tell that I'm gonna hate this episode. First, we get a small convo between Claire and her father where her dad explains that he never meant to hurt Claire by not telling her about Peter's condition, but instead that he was trying to cure his son and reunite them. But now that he's dying, he needs her to take over and find the cure. This is a fine conversation. It serves to prop up a C-plot I'm admittedly not overly attached to, but hey, they took a film with a runtime less than 2 hours, turned it into a 10-episode series. There's bound to be things added that weren't in the source material. I get that. I can live with that. I understand. But where episode 2 takes an immediate nosedive for me is where it's revealed that Claire's pops has been testing the cure on apes by infecting them with the same virus Peter has. Which, beyond giving me major Rise of the Planet of the Apes vibes, just makes me wish they had made this series under another title and removed any remnants of this being based on Let the Right One In the first place. Because at its heart, Let the Right One In is a coming-of-age story that happens to feature vampires, not a vampire story that happens to feature a coming-of-age component. When you stray too far away from that, you no longer have what makes Let the Right One In so special anymore. Instead, it just becomes another run-of-the-mill Hollywood vampire story. And if they're gonna go down that route, at least make it an actual vampire story instead of this hybrid vampire virus, which once again, if it's a virus, makes no sense for any infected person to need to be explicitly let in anywhere, which is the whole meaning behind the title. It's like the writers don't even understand the name of their own show. I can't. Whatevers. Anyways, the scene ends with one of the apes trying to attack Claire, but in doing so tears off its own leg and starts lapping up its blood. It's gruesome and dumb, and I just don't care. We then get back to Mark, who's having some heavy PTSD for murdering, unknown to him at the time, Isaiah's dad, Frank. So he works out a little and retreated to a nice training montage with flashbacks to his murder. I think this is important to this version of Ellie's familiar to humanize him and show that he's not a monster by choice, but instead forced into it to keep the person he loves alive. He still feels remorse and guilt for his misdeeds. This is a lot more on point of what this story is, so I applaud them for this. We then cut back to Naomi, who's calling Isaiah's dad to tell him about Isaiah's talent show, and he doesn't answer, of course, due to his subscription to Life being permanently revoked by Mark. So Isaiah slips an invitation to the talent show to Ellie, who's up and making Mark's breakfast. And she must be trying to take out Mark with the absolutely insane amount of salt she drowns this oatmeal in. Like, stop.
It's time to stop!
Oh, and small thing, since Ellie's a vampire, she would sleep during the day and be awake at night. Just kinda weird that they messed this up, but hey, since this is technically a virus now, there's no rules, I guess. Anyways, Ellie answers the door and Naomi gets weird vibes from her because she's not going to school and how Mark comes to the door to tell them they can't come right away. But Ellie gets Mark to agree that they'll talk about it. They get into a small fight, but the burning oatmeal breaks it up, and being the good dad he is, Mark still tries it.
Yeah.
Oh.
After, we get a small scene with Naomi and her partner at the autopsy where they find out that the killer isn't using weapons and is doing it by hand. Then jump to Claire and her dad again, where Claire learns more about this virus and finds out how Peter's basically a vampire and is living off blood. Understandably, she's thrown off by this and demands to know where they get the blood.
Claire would like to know where we source the blood that Peter requires.
I donate my own. So did your father.
before he got sick.
Blood must come from a healthy host.
And when your donation isn't enough?
Matthew and I have a contact at a blood bank.
Meanwhile, Mark goes to work where he speaks with Ellie's godfather / restaurant owner, Zeke, and Mark asks to borrow his car because he believes he can hunt down another creature like Ellie in hopes of basically finding Patient Zero and finding a cure. Zeke isn't having any of it though, but he does say something interesting that backshadows their past.
There was a time I needed your car. I wouldn't have to ask for it. You once told me a friend helps you move. A best friend helps you move a body.
Motherfucker, I helped you bury the body. And if you would have listened to me then, she'd still be alive today.
My best guess is that Zeke was talking about Ellie's mom, Mark's wife, which I think makes sense, especially because the very next scene is a flashback with Ellie and her mom around the time she first got infected. This is a sweet scene. You see the pain in Ellie's eyes and how confused and just scared she is, as anyone would be if they were turning into a vampire. Ellie's mom gives her a necklace telling her God never leaves us without hope and reaffirms that if she can find the host, they can find a cure. Remembering all this upsets Ellie though, and she smashes her hand in the mirror. It really makes me feel for her. Moving right along though, we get Claire talking with Peter for the first time. Peter tells her that he's still the same person and feels pain despite everything that's happened, and that it was actually him that kept all the secrets from her for all those years and not their dad, which I feel like will help them convince her to stay. But it's finally time for the talent show where we see Isaiah practicing his magic trick in the bathroom before he goes on. He texts his dad, who obviously doesn't answer, and then we see, I think, more of a realistic portrayal of the bullying Isaiah goes through. These guys feel like actual bullies, unlike from episode 1, and they're harsh. It's all just verbal threats so far, but it's stuff that cuts deep, especially the jab about how his dad left him. The bullying Isaiah endures is integral to his character, as it's why Ellie wants him to be more like her. I don't know if we're ever gonna get that payoff here, but hey, they kept it in. Then to quickly set up the third act and wrap this whole thing up, Zeke gives Mark his car keys for the night. Claire tells her father that she's staying. They get into a verbal fight, and Claire lands a devastating blow that just wow, just watch.
But I will pray for you. Because if there is a God, I can't even imagine the pain that awaits you.
Naomi arrives at the talent show. She texts Isaiah's dad, and like the cop that she is, sits right next to Ellie and basically interrogates her, which feels a bit weird, but I get that she's just concerned for her safety. And this is where the name of the episode, Intercessors, comes in. Mark goes to the cemetery to see his late wife's grave and prays that she intervenes with Zeke. At least, that's what I understood from this. Mark prays in Spanish, and he's really passionate about what he's saying. I just don't know any Spanish. Anyways, Mark leaves and follows a car that he thinks may lead him to more people like Ellie, and he's parked outside of their evil lair when one of the guards comes up to him and asks what he's doing there. Mark feeds him an obvious fake story that he's some chauffeur and that he'll be on his way. The guard does let him leave, but didn't buy the story at all, and now he's gonna figure out who the car really belongs to, which only means trouble for Zeke. Back at the talent show, Isaiah sees Ellie in the crowd, but not his dad, so he calls him once more, but again, no one answers, and he takes the stage. And almost immediately, the bullies begin to heckle him multiple times, even shining a laser pointer in his eyes. And this is where I think things get a bit goofy and even a little cringe, because at a middle school talent show, the place would be packed with mostly parents, teachers, and faculty. They would have been hauled out of there in so much trouble before they could even interrupt it a second time. But instead, they're just told, that's enough, and they continue. And listen, I understand that Isaiah gets bullied. It's a big part of his character, but this just isn't how it happens. It's more like how it was in the bathroom when they were all alone. Regardless, it's up to Ellie to step in and save the day when she goes on stage and tells Isaiah to make her disappear. He of course doesn't know how to do that, so she tells him to just trust her and do it anyways. And sure enough, when he does, she disappears and then reappears in the back of the theater, and everyone is amazed. They head back to Isaiah's apartment afterwards, and this is where we get the first time where Ellie actually has to be explicitly let in anywhere. So apparently, the writers didn't forget the title of the show after all. That's good to know. It's not ignorance, it's on purpose. Anyways, Mark shows up to pick up Ellie and sees her and Isaiah playing a game together, and I think he's genuinely happy for her. She, for the first time, finally has a friend, and so does Isaiah. But this happiness doesn't last for long though, because while Mark and Naomi wait for them to finish their game, Naomi goes to make some tea, and Mark looks around and finds out that Isaiah's dad is the same man he killed just a day ago. This obviously weighs on Mark, and I think makes him feel even worse now. Finally, the episode ends with Peter and Claire. She thinks Peter's having a seizure, but he's just really hungry, and she finally gets to figure out how Peter actually eats. And surprise, surprise, it's not from a blood bank. So we're just left with a gruesome image of Peter feeding and the blood-curdling screams from Claire. This episode made me much more frustrated than the last, mostly due to confirming that it's a virus, which doesn't even make sense in the show's own lore. Although I still do care about Ellie and Isaiah, and even Mark and Naomi, which is a plus, but also kinda a given. You should care about your main protagonists in most cases in most stories. I definitely want to find out more about Ellie's backstory and see what happens when Naomi and Isaiah find out that Frank is dead. There's a lot of loose ends that are still keeping me going, but as things go on, it just feels less and less like Let the Right One In, and instead should have just been called something else. I give this episode a 4 out of 10. But what do you think? Have you seen this episode? Let me know down below. And until next time, peace.